Hi, friends. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Guts and Grind. Thank you for joining and clicking. And while you're at it, subscribe, like, do all that kind of stuff too. Today's episode is really great. It's a little bit different because it's more business minded, but it's still in the real estate realm. We're interviewing Karan. He's a great dude. He's kind of had a big spectrum of dipping his toe in real estate. He did house hacking, short-term rentals, management, a lot of different things. Sid, do you have any insight on what was your favorite part of the interview?
I just love how he really killed it on the short term side, right? He really built, he found his niche, right? And I think his niche ultimately is the short term side of the business, and started off with a duplex that he was living in one side, and kind of without giving too much away, he rented the other side out, and then quickly found out, hey, the short term market is where you can make some heavy cash flow. And so we kind of dive into a lot of that, how he kind of partnered with some current partners, but just a wealth of knowledge, and primarily in the short term space. So if you guys are excited about the short term space, Karan is the man. So we're definitely going to have a great interview with this one.
That's right. That's right. And so what I really liked was what you said was like you find your niche and you run with it, and how quickly he found it. You know what I mean? Like he was trying different things and he found the niche and he ran with it, and it just kind of exploded, really. Without any further ado, let's dive right into the interview.
You're listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajin, making the real estate journey accessible to anyone.
All right, Karan, thanks for joining us today. I guess let's just get started. Why don't you give us a quick rundown of your background and, how you got into real estate?
Sure. Started my career in structured finance right out of college, and I was doing CMBS, commercial mortgage-backed securities. I did that for a number of years, and I was always very passionate about real estate. So 7 years into my career, I kind of was looking for a way to get into real estate, as CMBS market and structured finance market wasn't doing that great. I ended up finding a job in Austin, starting as a first year analyst again. But I ended up doing it. I took a huge pay cut and moved to Austin at this real estate private equity firm. And I just really loved what I did, every day analyzing deals and just kind of looking at properties and going out to property tours to, analyze them again. I figured that was my passion, and that when you realize what you're passionate about, you just move up a lot faster, and you just do so much better than you can do at something you don't really enjoy doing. So that was my first foray into real estate.
Could I ask you a quick question about that? So you said you were in the industry, which was mortgage-backed securities. Was that the whole 2008 thing going on? Like, were you caught in the middle of that, and that's why?
Exactly. Yeah, I started in 2005. So, I went through that whole time period where.
Wow, what a time to, golly, that's crazy, man. And so was that the push to say, hey, I need to try something new? Or was there this feeling of like, no, real estate's been in the back of my mind, and this is kind of the nudge to push me that way? Like, what did that look like for you?
Well, the push was more of, I need to figure out what I want to do next. This is not an industry. I wasn't really passionate about it. It was just a job, right? You went there 9 to 5, did your thing, got paid, but I had no passion or excitement for it. And I had kind of, on the side, we'd done a trip with some friends, actually with Teak and Silky, and it was Teak's birthday maybe about 12, 15 years ago. And we rented this lake house in Austin, right? We rented it for $1,000 a night, off season. That was our off season rate, on the water on Lake Travis. Had a pool, which we couldn't use because it was November, but it was also for sale for $1 million, right? So I just did some back of the napkin math, and I was like, if this guy only rents, 10 nights a month at $1,000 a night, which is the off-season rate, and never rents at the high season rate, which was, I think, $1,500 to $1,800 a night, the numbers just make sense. I was like, this is a no-brainer, right? So that kind of got me thinking about, how do I get into one of these? At that point, obviously, I was making 60, 70 grand a year. There's no way I was getting a loan for it.
Sure.
So just talked to a couple of friends, maybe we could pool in and get together, but it never panned out, right? Anyways, a year or two later, I ended up with this private equity job and moved to Austin. And then I really started thinking about, how do I get into this vacation rental stuff? Because it was just such a hot time in that industry. So I remember even when I came down for my interview to Austin, I had actually set up meetings with realtors to go look at some properties. That was my first kind of, okay, I got to make this happen. And then as I took this job, started working here, I was kind of looking on the side, and we ended up buying our first property at that time, soon after moving here. And that's another good story, actually. So this first property is a duplex that we still owned right by Lake Austin, Mopac. And the idea was, hey, we'll rent out one side and live on the other side.
Nice.
And there were a bunch of college kids in there. It was completely trashed. And I still remember, so we went, there were 3 offers on it. And this was back in 2012, the whole multiple offer situation. Very different from what it's been like in the last couple of years in Austin. But we still went 10K over asking, which was a lot.
Sure.
And we ended up getting the deal. And then my wife and I were like, oh shit, now what? How do we afford this place?
That's awesome.
It was and I just about had enough income to kind of qualify on it, or what I thought. But then when we went through underwriting and whatnot, we were a little shy, so we couldn't actually afford it.
Oh,
but
man.
fortunately, Versha's parents were willing to co-sign us, so they co-signed us on that first one, and that's how we bought it. I mean, we had the money for the down payment, just couldn't, get the loan approved.
Now, Karan, real quick. So you said that was kind of a duplex. We call it house hacking it, right? So you live in one side and maybe hopefully rent out the other side. So when you ran the numbers, did that, even with, I guess, the other half being rented out, and this is you factoring, we can kind of, I guess, contribute to the mortgage? Is that what you're saying, that you kind of fell short on the mortgage there?
No, so they wouldn't count the other side's rental income back for whatever reason back then. They wouldn't. We had to qualify for the entire. Yeah. So the other side's rental income more than covered the entire note. And
it did. Okay.
Yeah. So back then, the rent for one unit was $22.50. Our mortgage even today is $19.52. So.
Oh wow. Okay.
So it's really just getting over that hump of buying the actual house, like getting the property to say, hey, we have enough money to actually float the note. But was it hard to rent out? And like, I guess you were a landlord and a co-tenant at the same time. Like, was that difficult, or what did that look like?
No, that was easy. The tenants were already there. So one side was already there. The other side was vacant. And we renovated the other side and moved in. So it was that simple. So we just kept those guys there. And they moved again. And then once we renovated our side, we started doing this weekend thing where let's try renting it out on weekends and we'll find somewhere to go. So we've rented out for $350 a night for Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And now we're pulling in, $1,050 a weekend. Wow. And we're still living there, but $1,050, we're going to Houston or couch or going out of town or whatever. It's a vacation, right?
That is so cool. So and this is the house you're living in, like the side the part of your duplex that is your home. So that means all your stuff, all that stuff is still there, right? Like, so you didn't feel any type of way. It was just like, no, we'll give it a try, see what happens.
I didn't feel any type of way, but my wife did. So, so after a couple of times of doing this, we ended up getting a small 1-bedroom studio, like right across the street. And the idea was, okay, we'll just go here on the weekends. We'll lock our stuff up in a closet, and we'll have a place to crash instead of having to go to Houston or someone's guest bedroom every weekend, right? It's kind of awkward after a while.
Right. That's a brilliant way of getting into that game. And was Airbnb and VRBO like a thing back then when you started, or was this a different game, or how did that work for you?
The Airbnb wasn't even really around. We weren't using it. We were using HomeAway, which got acquired by VRBO, but HomeAway was so that's what we were on HomeAway. And back then you could actually list your phone number on there, so people would call you to book, and it was a very, different process automated, right? But anyway, so we started doing this, and we're making like $2,200 on this side with the long-term guys, and we're making like $4,000 on our side, and we're still living there.
That's crazy.
We've got $1,000 monthly payment for this rental unit, renting is a crash pad. So anyways, we moved out of this house in 6 months, and even though the idea was to come and go, we ended up just staying in that rental unit, that studio. We ended up staying there for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because this was just doing so well, right? So
yeah.
And then when the second lease ended for the long-term renters, we just renovated that side and converted it into a short-term as well. So now from 2,200 on one side and we're now at over $8,000.
Wow.
Let me ask you a real quick question about okay, so as a married man here, you had to get your wife on board with this project, right? Like, how was that process? I'll tell you, like, a lot of women wouldn't allow them to rent out your primary living space, right? I mean, did that take a lot of like kind of coercing or maybe convincing to like figure this out? Because it sounds like you didn't even have an idea of how much you were potentially sitting on from a short-term rental perspective, right?
Right.
This is a pie in the sky. Let's hope for the best, right? But how did that look like with that discussion with your wife?
The idea was when we started, it was like, okay, we'll have somewhere else to go. We'll have our own linens, towels, and sheets and whatever, right? We're not sharing the same stuff. But after a while, it's like, well, it's the bathroom. We're sharing the bathroom. And we had cleaners come and clean it professionally every guest. But after a while, we were just like, okay, we'll just stay in this studio. It's fine. We'll manage, but we can't give up like an extra couple of grand a month. So that was kind of the conversation, and we're like, we'll figure it out. We'll maybe buy the next place or whatever, but let's just start
Right.
and try this out. So that's kind of how it went.
It seems like this thing was baking in the background anyway, right? So I'm sure you were talking about it. It wasn't like hey, we're living here. By the way, let's not live here anymore. Let's give up our weekends and go. I mean, if you were talking about it on that vacation that you were on with Teak and them, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure she knew that it was in the background, like kind of bubbling, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of how it started. And that, having this extra 4K coming in a month, that allowed me to quit my job. And I was like, well, now I can figure out and like really focus on this, right?
Yeah.
A 9 to 5, or well, it was much more than a 9 to 5, but I don't have to worry about anything else. And $4 grand a month, 15 years ago was a great amount of money to just.
It's a big deal. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I like the way you did it because it was like you had the security of the long-term rental on one side of the duplex, and then hey, let's test the waters in our own home, right? And like
Exactly.
I'm sure people have done that before, but I'd never thought of that. I mean, that's brilliant. And so you said you were on the water. So was it a very ideal vacation spot, or was it like
No, it wasn't on the water. It was close to Lake Austin.
Close to Lake Austin? Okay, gotcha.
Downtown. It's a very good location in terms of proximity to Zilker Park for ACL, and still does pretty well, just mainly because of the location. It's not a great looking property anymore. It's just older. It's a little dated. There's a lot of newer vintage stuff and available now. So it's mostly does well because of the location.
So Karan, your primary looks like is more in the short term space, right? Is that kind of where you evolved from there? Are you still just expanding your short term?
Yeah, absolutely. I just
properties?
kind of just focus on the short term, and I've kind of figured out the formula that works, and now I just replicate it over and over again. Obviously now I've gotten into higher end properties. That's what kind of does well. Like try to build like a mini resort, right? Because there's just so many 5 bedrooms and 6 bedrooms, and as the market has changed over the last 10 years, 15 years, there's just a lot more inventory of similar products that I had back then. So there's more, you have more competition, right? I think the market has kind of evolved into this higher end luxury, private pools, pickleball courts, just a resort style experience. That's kind of the direction that I'm kind of going in now.
Are you still buying high end properties now, or have you kind of shifted the focus from, obviously there's a big market for short term now, right? I mean, the catches got on through COVID, right? I mean, I feel like Airbnb was a big old thing that kind of popped, right, because of everybody's kind of short term renting and traveling through the pandemic. So because of that market, and it sounds like you're in the Austin area, and you said you're trying to separate yourself, right, as a product, right? So it sounds like you're going, is it like, are you buying these big properties? Are you building them? How are you kind of
a mix of both. So the last 2 years, I've built quite a few of them, 5, 6 bedrooms, either really good locations or waterfront or, whatever it is. It's got to be something that stands out that makes it different from the rest, right? The last year I built 2, really nice houses very close to downtown, pools, and just kind of went crazy with the decor and, make it feel like it's not a place that someone would want to live, but it's more of like one of the houses was a Tulum theme, right? So it's a very jumpy vibe, and the other one's a super Palm Springs. So just it's like bachelor party galore. Like every weekend, all we attract is bachelorette. Sorry, not bachelor parties. that was the idea, because it's got the colors are very bachelorette-esque, and I don't know. I let the designer kind of figure that part out, like what the selections and whatnot. But the idea is, how do we target a certain demographic?
So when did you shift from? Because I'm assuming you went from, hey, this is just a normal place where you can just hang out, and then it's a place to live, and you go see the attractions, to making it a destination. Like your actual spot is the destination. Like, because I'm assuming that's a big price jump as well, right? If you're going into luxury homes and things like that, right? Like, how long were you in that game before you shifted?
The next 2 properties were still great locations, and we still have them, but they're just not as successful anymore, just because there's just nicer stuff out there, right?
Sure.
But whenever I buy something, I look for a Class A location that's where the value is in the land, and you can always tear down the house. So one of them we're looking at, hopefully this year or next year, tearing it down and just completely rebuilding it. And it's right outside Lamar. We bought it for under 500K, and just the land itself is worth more than double of that today. So it's the idea is the improvement is worth probably nothing, because it's like an old 1960s house, and we did some lipstick on a pig remodel 10 years ago when we bought it, and it works, but it's kind of like everyone's last resort. when nothing else is available, or it's because it's the cheapest house available. It still pays, it still makes us a yield, but it's just getting harder and harder because the competition's gotten hard. There's a lot more supply of better quality homes. So yeah, we're kind of trying to get rid of the older, nastier properties and kind of get to the higher end luxury type stuff.
That is so cool. And you mentioned that you have a designer. So I'm assuming you have a team around you that does certain aspects of it. Because I was going to say, like, do you do the design or do you do so what does your team look like and how do you even find them?
Yeah, it's not an in-house team. It's just use this designer, use her for all of my projects, and she just I'm like, here's what I want to go. I want you to go wild, pick the craziest wallpapers, kind of like what you have back there. We have something similar on one of our walls, and it's just it pops in pictures, right? At the end of the day, I'm in the business of selling photographs. That's it. So then I'm a cleaning and maintenance company. So
Karan, how do you fund these deals? So like, yeah, you're talking about, these are nice sized properties, right? So $500,000. Are you going through conventional routes? Are you partnering with people? What's that look like?
I have one partner who I have on a couple of houses. He's a good friend, and he was the first one who helped get, buy the second property and the third property because he had great W-2 income. And he's, just hands off, signed the loan. So he's still a partner in a couple of them, but for the rest of them, I kind of just go solo. I just don't like, having to deal with answering to people.
Yeah.
I'm with you, man.
Yeah. So fortunately, I have the ability to do that. So obviously, if there's a larger scale project where I can't, then I have to bring on someone, right? But then you just have to be a lot more particular in your accounting and your, create the, here it's all coming. But yeah, so for most of them, I don't have a partner and I don't have traditional financing. It's just, balance sheet debt from, a small community bank, or it's mostly like smaller banks. And then several of them are just cash.
How do you make those relationships with those smaller banks to be able to do that? Like, I'm assuming you're saying, hey, look at my track record, look at the income I'm making. And then you just go to the bank and show, hey, like, give me a loan based off of that. Is that how that works?
So a couple of them are, two of them are through brokers who sold me the property, also introduced me to the lender. Another small bank that I have a bunch of loans with, I've known them for a couple of years. One of the head guys used to work at a different bank who I had something with. And then they kind of started off here. So he's like, hey, come on, you're doing well. When you first start off, you got to chase these guys and you're going to cold call and you're going to do a lot of dirty work. And then once you kind of get to a certain point, they're chasing you, because they want to give you that loan. So now I get calls from lenders all the time, like, hey, what's, I see your portfolio. Are you looking for anything, looking for refinancing but I try to stick to the, even if the rates and terms are a little bit unfavorable through one lender, I'd rather just keep it all with them if I have like a good, relationship with them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like sometimes that matters more because like when you're looking for the long term, it's good to know the actual person rather than like chase a rate,
Right. And then, the worst thing I've seen is when you don't have a relationship with someone, it's a great deal at first. It sounds fantastic. And day before closing, it's like, well, the underwriter wants this, and this, and we're going to change these terms. And it's always, lenders are known for this bait and switch game. Which is very frustrating. So I'd rather deal with someone, I have a relationship with, and even if it's slightly higher at the beginning.
So Karan, are these all commercial loans or are these residential type loans? What loan products are we talking about?
Yeah, they're kind of more on the commercial side. Terms look more commercial than they do residential.
Oh, really? So even with like a 5-bedroom, let's just say it's a massive house, right? So do they consider it kind of a business, or are you kind of pulling it out of a LLC?
Right, it depends on but the ones that I'm using, they're looking at it more in it's their own money that they're lending, so it's not government Freddie Fannie, that kind of debt. So they have their own guidelines for the most part, but they're not doing 30-year notes, right? They're doing more of 5, 7, 10. So that's what I do. The last ones I did last year, right before the rates went up, I did 7-year fixed debt and locked in at 4%, and we're good, right, for 7 years.
That's awesome.
Hopefully by 7 years we can pay the whole thing off, but we'll see.
Oh wow, I was just gonna ask, like, is the plan to pay it off, or is it just to refinance and then find a better loan or something like that?
I think it depends on what terms look like in 7 years. But now I'm just paying off the minimum payment, but if terms are, rates are worse than they are today or same level, then it probably makes sense to have a lower payment on it. So 4%, it's a no-brainer,
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question, Karan. It sounds like you have a wide variety of Airbnb portfolios, right? You have the high end, and then you have, let's just say, your low end, just normal, right? I mean,
I'd call it mid scale. I wouldn't call it low end. We don't do low end at all. They're still, $600-700 a night minimum.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and they're 4 or 5 bedrooms. Like we don't even touch 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom properties. What I've learned is you're doing a lot more work for the same amount of reward, right? Like
Right.
whether you rent to a guy spending $50 a night or rent a guy spending $1,000 a night, the amount of work done to get that and to deal with that reservation is exactly the same. In
Wow.
fact, it actually, the person spending $50 a night or $200 a night is more, they're more the type of guest who's looking for a refund at the end of the day or looking for a discount, or like, but the guy spending $1,500 a night doesn't really ask for, oh, the light bulb wasn't working in one closet, can I get a refund?
Yeah.
Okay, just get it fixed, no big deal.
Yeah,
So
it sounds you kind of answered my question, because I was gonna ask, hey, where the market is right now in the short term in the world, right? I mean, is it leaning more towards that high end? It's what I'm hearing is, yeah, those specialty markets where they're uniquely decorated, uniquely, situated. Those are the ones that are kind of getting more of the business now in the short term world, right? And I feel
I
like
wouldn't
that's
say I wouldn't say more. I think there's a different demographic for each, right? It's like
mm,
you have a budget motel and then you have the W, right? Like they both have their own markets, right?
yeah,
So I just want to be in the W's market and not in, whatever budget Howard Johnson motel, right?
yeah,
Right.
The demographic that Howard Johnson deals with and the demographic that W deals with are two different types of people in terms of, the damages they cause and, education levels or whatever it is. It's just these guys are an easier type of person to deal with when they're paying $1,500 a night versus, and we've tried both, right? And
Right.
it's more of a headache in terms of the amount of work that we have to put in, the amount of time and the amount of phone calls because they don't read check-in instructions,
yeah. Are
Now
you
that
managing everything yourself, by the way?
Yeah,
Yeah.
my wife does, reads the operations, and then we have a couple other people, contract workers, and then yeah, we have a couple people on our team, and we're
nice.
trying
That's
to grow.
awesome.
So yeah.
So you've done the different types of Airbnb or short-term rentals. You've also done long-term, short-term, and I think I know the answer. But like between long-term and short-term rentals, it seems like short-term is the way to go. Like, is that your
I
opinion
think
or?
it completely depends on the size, the location. There's so many variables. It depends on the property. We do have some long-term rentals too, because
Okay.
short-term doesn't make sense over there, right? They're like
Mm.
smaller 2-bedroom condos, and yeah, it just doesn't. The numbers don't make sense. If on the smaller properties, I've noticed the spreads are too small. So what you would get in long-term and short-term is about the same,
I
right?
see.
So why put in all the extra work and
Right.
if you're going to get maybe $200 more a month? It's not worth it, right?
I see. Yeah.
So, but on the bigger ones that have pools and amenities and are close to downtown, walk to Rainy Street, where
Right.
that attract tourists, and you're competing with, say, 5 hotel bedrooms. So say a 5-bedroom house price wise compares to 5 hotel rooms, and we're half the price of 5 hotel rooms. People are going
Oh
to
yeah.
want that, and they have their own kitchen. They also have
Yeah.
a private pool, so it just depends on the
Yeah.
property. Yeah.
So when you're looking for properties, I was assuming that you're only looking for short-term rentals, but you're also looking at long-term as well. Like, what you just kind of have a wide spread, or like what's your acquisition look like when you're on the hunt?
Yeah, the primary focus is short-term rentals, something that I can either completely rehab or, lot a piece of land that I can build from scratch.
Right.
But I have been over the last couple of years buying these pre-construction condo deals that have done pretty
Oh,
well. So that's the only reason we have a couple of condos, because we bought them pre-construction with the bet. It was kind of like a options play where you're putting down $5,000 today and you're betting that this area will be worth, this condo, by the time they deliver it to you in 2 years, it's going to be worth another $100,000 or $200,000, right?
oh wow.
So I did that. We've done that a few times. Well, probably like 10 or 15 times now. You're only putting in 5 or 10 grand. So worst case scenario, if the market tanks in 2 years and it's worth less than what you bought it under contract, one, you need to walk away from that money, or two, for the most part, the builder is going to have to correct it because it's not going to appraise, and then the rest, most of the people aren't going to be able to buy it, right? For us, it's kind of worked out well. It's always gone up, at
Yeah.
least a little bit. So some of them have gone up, the 10 grand's become 150 grand. Some of them, the 10 grand's become 50 grand, but it hasn't gone down yet. And I'm sure it will at some point. Nothing ever just goes up, right? So
Right.
we have a couple of these condo units that we long-term rent.
Right. No, that's amazing. Even just the idea of like, hey, I'm just putting 10,000 down for the hope that it does increase, but at the end of the day, it's still a property that you could sell or rent out or whatever, and
Right.
not be in the hole. Like, so in your scenario, you're not particularly selling it, right? You're holding on to it as a long-term rental.
No, I've sold some. We have a couple in the market that were actually just closed on one today as well that have gone under contract about 3 years ago. It took them 3 years to build. Yeah, it actually burnt down midway through the development. The whole development burnt down.
No way.
Yeah, when we had that whole homeless situation in Austin,
Right.
I think some homeless people got in and started a fire and burnt down the entire property.
Oh
Um,
wow.
we had to rebuild it. But anyways, yeah, so we have some that we just rent out and some we sell and just waiting for the right opportunity as well.
So when you do those plays, the idea is to sell, or is it like, hey, the ideal situation is to sell and get the bag,
Yes,
or
that's yeah.
if I'm not able to sell, then I'll rent it out as long term.
Yeah, so the ideal situation is to sell and get your make your 10 grand into 100 grand or 150 grand or whatever, and then get it
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
That's always the ideal situation, but sometimes it doesn't quite work out. Or some of them there's sales restriction periods where you can sell only after the builder is sold out. So there's
Oh,
stipulations. So some of them were waiting, some of them just ended, so we just listed them. And that was also not the best time to sell, but whatever. As long as you make something on it, rather roll that money into something else, right?
Yeah. So Karan, going back to operationally, so it looks like, do you have like just a handbook on how you kind of do this? Like going forward, do you have an operational manual on, hey, these are the checklists? What systems do you use? Kind of, I mean, is that more your wife, or like do you kind of have that basically
No,
build plated?
yeah, we both handle, we both help with operations. So we have obviously use software. So we use a specific property management software that's built for vacation rentals. We have a technology stack, right? We use a AI tool for pricing the rate per night. It looks at all the properties in our market and adjusts daily pricing, kind of like hotels do, right? Like you look at
Yeah.
it today, it's different from what it was yesterday.
Yeah.
So we have software for that. We've got software that, and all these softwares integrate into our PMS, which is our main, property management software. And then we've got software for I'm trying to think what else. Oh, for scheduling, cleaning, and maintenance tasks and stuff that again kind of comes in. So those are, I think, the three big ones that we use.
How long did that take to kind of set that up? I know it's got to have, you had to manually intervene in the beginning, right? Like kind of set all this up and kind of figure it out, because that's always been the thing for me. I've always wanted to get into short term, but it's kind of understanding all these systems, right, and getting your
Yeah.
processes down. Because if you're not on top of that, it can be a very manual and laborious task to kind of manage it, right?
To some extent, if you have under five, I say you probably don't even need a software. You can
Okay.
manage everything. And now Airbnb has gotten to a point where they have their own pricing algorithms, they have their own automated responses and automated check-in instructions. So you can automate a lot of that stuff just through Airbnb. And then, your calendars kind of sync with VRBO. So you can do that with, if you have 2 to 3 or maybe even up to five. But once you start going to 4 or 5, I think you kind of need something a little more robust where you can look at your calendars. And also, we're on our second one. We started off with a different company when we first started, when we got to like 5 properties, and that company got acquired by, a huge hotel software company. And then they kind of just pushed it in a direction that wasn't vacation rentals anymore. It was very hotel-esque. And although they're similar, they're very different, right?
Yeah.
So it just didn't work, and then they stopped innovating. And so we switched over to this new company about 3 years ago. And that was, again, huge pain, right? Like you got to bring on existing reservations and create your listings. And however easy they make it sound that you can just click a button and it'll all upload, it doesn't work like that. But then, their teams kind of help kind of do all that dirty work as well. So we had to do some work, but not all of it, and kind of just make sure that everything's intact. But hopefully we don't have to switch again. That's always a tough one, especially as you scale. Is making that switch is very difficult.
Speaking of scale, what's the plan for the next, 1 to 3 years? I mean, is this still short term? Do you have other asset classes you want to kind of touch on? Like, what's the goal in the next few years? I don't like the 10-year window. I'm more,
Yeah.
hey, with the next couple of years,
For the next couple of years, I'd say 1 to 3, probably just focus on luxury short term. Another good thing for me is I get to learn from properties that we take on as just from management of what does well and what doesn't. We recently took on this insane 9 bedrooms. It's got a pool. It's got a hot tub. It's got this party barn with like a bar and like poker tables and just a shuffleboard and what else? Ping pong, pool. And it's basically like people are renting this because this party barn feels like you're renting a private bar, right?
Yeah.
So you get this and that one is just killing it. So I need to figure out how to build or buy something similar to that. And these guys did a really nice job decorating it, but we started it in the last 3 months and we've already taken on 300 grand of bookings almost.
Wow.
Or maybe
in 3 months,
250. Yeah.
Dude.
I mean, it's not for 3 months, it's for this year.
Right.
But we're getting bookings, like every minimum weekend booking is like, 7 to 10 grand. And some weekends are going to like 15 grand. People are paying 15 grand for one booking. And it's like, wow, this works.
Did
So
y'all buy
amazing.
that one? Was that
no. We just manage it. We have nothing we don't have any ownership. But my point is, I get to learn from, okay, that's what works, right? Or someone buys something else and it's like, man, it doesn't work. So let's not do that. So
that's a great position to be in.
Yeah, it's kind of a nice thing that the ability to have to be able to learn from other people's successes or mistakes. But so going back to your question, the next couple of years, I think just kind of try to expand the owned portfolio as well as the managed properties. Hopefully get back into commercial. I feel like there'll be a correction in the commercial real estate world, whether it's retail, multifamily. So I'm just waiting for that dip, the correction to come, and if it does, then get into some other asset classes.
Nice. Wow, that's cool. I had a question about the construction aspect of it, because it's one thing to buy a property that's already there, it's already built and you could remodel, we've done that for our rentals. But to build from scratch, I feel like that's a whole different beast, right?
Yeah.
How did you get into that? And like, I mean, I could understand the reason why. Like, why would you want to? Because you have the ability and you find land or whatever. But that's a whole different world. Like, can you walk us through that process, like for one of the deals, I guess?
Yeah, sure. So in the last couple of years, I've built about 4 or 5 new constructions, all kind of 5, 6 bedrooms plus, basically 5 to 7, all have swimming pools. So I have an architect that I use him for every project. I've got an interior designer that I use her for every project. And then I've got a couple of GCs that I haven't used all of them for every project, but between, I kind of rotate between them depending on the project. And then of course, she picks all the finishes. I'm just kind of like a supervisor, kind of bringing these people together and making sure they talk to each other, because they all hate each other, or they pretend like they hate each other. And they're always, it's that one's fault. I'm like, okay, calm down. Let's just figure it out. We can get this together. So that's all I do.
Okay. So it's really the team. Like you're piecing together
the
architect, the GC, the designer, and make sure they play well. Like,
I don't build it myself. I don't GC it myself. It's just way too much of a time commitment. And I feel like letting a professional, they'll do it faster. If I save like 100 grand or 200 grand or whatever it is, right? But it costs me an extra 6 months of lost revenue. I'd rather just pay him 200 grand and and not have to put any of my time in, right? Like I'd rather spend my time finding the next deal, or because last year at one point there was a time when I had 5 of them going together. I would have never been able to manage 5 in different locations and still manage the management company. So I'm glad I didn't really dabble or get into.
That's great. That's a great piece of advice, because like I suffer through this and I know a lot of other people do too. Let's do it yourself. Like let's figure out how to get it done, save that money, But you don't think about the other side of it, where it's like, well, you might be saving money, but you're losing time, and time is really, you never get that back. You never get your time back. You can make a lot more money, but you never get your time back. And it's better to, what's your highest and best use, right? And
exactly.
I feel like
exactly. So anything that I can outsource to someone else, let's outsource it, right? Like, and focus on like just kind of finding these better deals, or going and talking to other agents to help me find deals, right? I mean, there's only so much time that you have, right? So if it's like basic stuff that can be outsourced and they can run it, let them do it.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. It feels like you're doing it all right. So this next question, if you had to start all over, what would you change? What would you do? Or would you stay the course? Or what's the thought on that?
That's a tough question. Yeah, if I'd start all over and had nothing, I'd have to start with the, again, with the deepest value add type deals, right? Like to try to make the highest return really quick, right? So obviously you got to start with the smallest properties, maybe a fix and flip. I don't know. Maybe a $200,000-$300,000 fix and flip where you can make 50 grand real fast. Of course you could go wrong, but that's kind of the easiest way and fastest way to make like a short, decent amount of cash.
Right.
Again, go and roll into something else.
I love the way you started, man. I love the way you started with the house hack. I feel like you can't go wrong with that. Like you have somebody else paying for your mortgage and you're living in the same building with them.
Right.
I think
Yeah,
that's if I was younger and if I was able to redo it all over again, I wish because that's when you're most nimble too, right? When you're
exactly.
young and you're naive, you're willing to take the risk, right? Like
I would not
now,
have been willing to couch surf today, and
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely not my wife either. But
Right.
also, I think timing is key. Like I was at the right place at the right time,
yeah,
and I could have executed all these things the same way. And if timing was off, I would have failed, right? Like
Right.
there was a lot of luck involved, and I think that's with everything in life. Like timing has to be, rates were low. Austin market was not hot. It's gone up like crazy over the last, especially the last 3 years, right? But it's
Yeah.
prepped up over the last 15 years and kind of got in, right, just at that right time with those first couple. And then from there, it's been kind of executing, making right decisions on how to add value to it by not paying market price so that you can
Yeah.
build in your equity. But it's also difficult in an environment like today where your interest rates are 7%, property prices are still kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Like it's tough for someone to just go buy a property today and make that sort of return. And then Airbnb competition is through the roof, right? Like you're there. I was looking at some data. So one of our software partners provides us a lot of data on the market, and I was looking at something for a specific. I was looking for a specific submarket, a radius. I did a 20-mile radius of a specific area close to downtown, and from December 2021 to December 2022, the properties vacation rentals in that area went from 1,100 to 1,900,
wow,
almost doubled.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
even though the demand may have increased and there's more people coming, it hasn't doubled compared
yeah,
to the supply,
Yeah.
right? So it's just not as, you really got to understand your market that you're getting into, understand the supply. And there's so many markets like that in the country right now that are just getting, that have no restrictions, no regulations. Builders are just building,
Right.
churning, and then investors are like, oh, that's the top vacation rental market. I live in California. Let me just go buy one out in Tennessee, the Smoky
Yeah.
Mountains, because it's the best. And people are going to get burned. It's a matter of time.
I was gonna ask, like, if someone was getting into or considering getting into the short-term rental game, because like you said, timing was a big thing for your
Yeah.
success. Do you think someone could find success in getting into it today? Or is it like, has that ship sailed, or like what kind of advice would you give someone that's trying to start?
I think so. It's gotten a lot harder. 10 years ago, you could throw a dart in anything and it would hit and you'd do well, right?
Yeah.
Today, you better do your due diligence on the submarket, understand where that market is headed, understand what if there's regulation, what hotels are coming to that are being built. You can go to your code department and find out what's in the pipeline, right?
Yeah, hold on, let me ask you that. Like, so if you know where a hotel's being built, that's a benefit to an Airbnb?
No, that's just more competition, right? It's
Oh,
it's
more
not direct
competition. I get
competition,
it.
but it's
Yeah,
indirect competition, right?
I
It's
get you.
kind of tough to know what Airbnbs are coming on because someone's could be building a house. It could be for themselves. It could be as an investment. You're never going to know.
Sure, yeah.
But one of the areas I'm thinking about is the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. It was at one point it was the number one vacation rental destination, but in the last 2 years they've just been building and building, and prices have gone up.
yeah.
Like Austin, but there's no regulation there, so they just keep building. People from out of state who have heard of it as the number one vacation rental destination are just buying it sight unseen, and eventually it's going to crash, right? Like,
Yeah.
When you say regulations, so does Austin have a lot of regulations, and is there a lot of red tape for Airbnb?
yeah, so the Austin does have regulation. They haven't been very strictly enforcing it. So I'm hoping to get a little stricter with it. I think regulation is good because you don't want entire neighborhoods turning into frat parties either, right?
Yeah,
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think, back in the day, they used to have, it was a code that said you could do 3% of every zip code or census code or something like that, whatever it was, right? It was like basically every zip was allowed maybe 100, 200 homes, something like that, which is a small percentage. Today, they're not because I think there's a lawsuit by the federal government against the state or something like that that's preventing the state from enforcing it or the county from enforcing it. And I think eventually, hopefully that gets figured out. But I think regulation is good.
it's almost like you have to get a license to actually
Yeah,
open up an
yeah.
Airbnb, right? It's
Yeah, so
something
we
like
have
that.
licenses on most of our properties. And then I don't mind going into unregulated areas where, there's a limitation on that type of land. So like, for example, waterfront, right? If you go to waterfront property, there's only so much water frontage.
Right.
So, it makes it a little bit less risky because those type of properties maintain their value. If you need to sell and vacation rentals aren't doing well, at least those don't typically go down in value. They can,
Right.
Like Lake Travis has, but that's not a constant level lake. It's, it's very cyclical. So when there's a drought, people's waterfront houses are suddenly not waterfront anymore.
Oh, wow.
I don't go out to Lake Travis because there's so much unknown. I wouldn't mind touching it when it is in a drought and you're buying a waterfront house that can become a waterfront house.
Right.
Right. When the
Wow.
rain comes. But the lakes that we have properties on are all constant level, which is mainly Lake LBJ. Your yield may not be as high. There's a limited amount of downside to it as well.
Dude, this is a super insightful, man. I feel like we talk to you all day about this stuff, man, but we don't want to burn up all your day, man. We really appreciate you, joining us on this interview. And if people want to connect with you, I guess we'll put something in the show notes, with your contact info if you wanted to share that. But yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up here. Siji, did you have any additional things that you wanted to talk about, or?
No, all good, Karan. I mean, it's this is awesome segment. I mean, we haven't covered a lot of the Airbnb and the short-term rental space, but I'm sure. I mean, I've learned a lot. I'm sure our people that are listening will learn a lot from your interview. And kudos to you, man.
Well, thank you, thank you guys for having me, and appreciate it. And happy that we could chat about this.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, y'all. Well, have a good one.
Take care, guys. Signing off.
Thanks for listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajin. Be sure to tune in next time.